Hello everyone, welcome back to July 2nd Call of Duty DFS Slate breakdown. Should be a pretty interesting for gamer. We could quickly recap yesterday's abysmal performance and then we can go ahead and talk about going up tomorrow. So yesterday, Boston got the pretty large upset over Seattle. The map set did actually end up becoming pretty good, however, it was just Boston played a little bit better. They're continuing to just kind of be the bane of my existence. They're pretty up and down. Sib played pretty poorly as well. It definitely played into it. They got destroyed in the control, especially Sib did. That was a large difference there. Really big performances from Vivid on the first map and Narrow from the third map, and then it's kind of a group effort in the fourth one. So pretty decent stuff from Boston. I knew this was going to be happening eventually with Seattle. I just did not expect this to be the spot for it to happen. I don't know. I'm pretty interested to see what it's going to look like tomorrow. I believe they're playing New York. So I'm intrigued to see what the odds are going to be. I expect Seattle to still be the favorite, but I'm intrigued. We'll see. The first series was, of course, Atlanta faced Toronto Ultra. They just kind of got destroyed here. The control was close. The search and destroy and the hard point were not. The map set did not end up coming to fruition that I anticipated. I don't know what happened, but they ended up on like a Vutu, which was not a good map for Toronto. I'm not sure why they ended up doing this. But mainly it came down to Simp having a really, really strong series. Celium and Arcides did pretty well as well. Bans got completely destroyed. Clinics got destroyed. The Toronto SMGs are continuing to have struggles. Regardless, I mean, inside, although his -5 didn't look too bad, he was just not fighting anyone, and he arguably had the worst series of them all. It was really just Cammy, and he didn't really have any help from anyone else. So pretty disappointing from Toronto. I thought they would have at least made the series close. Honestly, and obviously did not come to fruition at all. And then the one series we did end up getting correct was the underdog London Royal Ravens. Again, they're just continuing to kind of be a little bit slept on, I think. Afro did okay. Zero did okay. It was just a strong performance from Nasty. We have still yet to see Gizmo kind of come back and fully return to form. But I think we did end up getting the map set correct. It was the Tuscan Berlin, which is a pretty okay one. So overall, pretty decent stuff there on this series, but 1 out of 3 isn't clearly not enough to do anything with. So we take it on the chin and move on, and then we could resume right back up with them. London Royal Ravens versus the Florida Mutineers. Florida a slight favorite, and this is honestly incredibly shocking. I am very, very surprised to see this. Right off the bat, obviously on DK, Florida is really, really expensive as well. For some reason, they don't have 2 real in the player pool. I don't think anything has happened with Florida, right? Yeah, not that I know of. I'm not sure why 2 real would not be in the player pool. So that's pretty weird. But overall, I still think Florida's incredibly overrated here. If we look at the team stats, I don't know. I'm struggling so hard to get to that page, but if we look at Florida and then London, obviously both these teams ended up changing out their rosters pretty recently. So it is just the major 4 that we're going to look at. Although we could definitely add a little bit more here, but both these teams have kind of rejuvenated rosters, so looking at their old stats feels a little misleading, but it is what it is. We can still look at it in some ways. Obviously, first glance, I mean, London 3-1 to Toronto, and then they got the 3-1 over Minnesota yesterday as well. Florida, they've 3-0'd Minnesota, and they got the 1-3 defeat versus New York. So I think overall, in the grand scheme, these teams are probably pretty close to each other. But again, this price is completely shocking to me. I just thought London was going to be a pretty decent sized favorite. I think people are buying into Florida very, very quickly, and I still am not too convinced. That they've been playing well. Well enough to kind of justify this. So if we look at their previous match, obviously it was a really, really big performance from Major Maniac against his former team from Minnesota. And then Skies ended up having a pretty good match as well. I don't think you can rely on either of those things to be replicated, to be perfectly honest. So in this one, I'm completely all over London. I know the map set is not going to be good because London typically ban Bocage. Florida either ban Berlin or Tuscan. I'd imagine that they ban Berlin here. So Florida will ban Berlin, and Bocage will end up on a Gavutu Tuscan most likely. I would favor Florida on the Tuscan and then London on the Gavutu. However, I think Florida are actually relatively decent on both of these maps. So if you think about it from that standpoint, I definitely think Florida can be a pretty decent shout. The problem is, of course, Florida is mad expensive for pretty much no reason here. I don't know what this is at all, but they've completely messed up Florida's pricing on here, and it makes them virtually impossible to play with. I mean, Yeez is still just a substitute, and he's in the player pool with Too Real not even being in. And then Major Maniac, Awakening, Skies, they're all completely overly priced, not even remotely close to where they should be. And then London is way too cheap. So I think either way, this is probably just going to be a London or pass. I could definitely see you just kind of leaving this game out of your player pool if you think maybe this is going to be a close one or maybe a Florida win. But it's really hard to try to justify those Florida price tags at anything at all. Even if, typically this is where I would say maybe paying up to get Florida in your lineups as a good contrarian spot would make sense. This is still just even way too out of the depths to even try to justify that, in my opinion. So this is going to be a complete London or pass. I actually do like London. I do think they're pretty cheap. I do think it's fine to get them into your lineups. I'm fine with that. Again, we look at the same players. They're kind of been across the board in terms of who's been performing here. So if we look at their 3-1s so far, the first series or the most recent series was Zero playing pretty well, and then Nasty with a little bit of Zero and Nasty, and then this one is obviously Zero and Nasty as well. So maybe those are just the two that you want. It looks like Afro and Gizmo are kind of the ones lacking a little bit behind. However, historically speaking, those have been their statistically two best players, Afro and Gizmo. So I'd still be fine loading up some Afro. I think Gizmo would probably be the one I'd leave off just because he's had 2 back-to-back series of not playing well, and he's typically he is coming back from that break of him not playing. So that would kind of be my lean there. I do like Florida. I like Zero at 7-8. I like maybe Nasty at 8-2. Afro at 7-8 as well. I think all three of these players are pretty viable, and it's just way too hard to try to justify those Florida price tags, even if they are kind of the favorite. I don't think they should be the favorite either way, so I definitely like London a good bit. They're going to be in some of my lineups for sure. I'm just not going to go too crazy with it because the map set I think is going to be pretty bad in terms of just in terms of map set and setting it up for DraftKings scoring. Up next is Paris versus Texas. Obviously, Optic Texas -1,000 favorite. Paris plus 575. This one's a little tough. I mean, obviously, Optic have not been in the best form as of late. Paris have not been in the best form ever. I don't think they've ever had good form, as you guys can see there on a, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 series loss streak. So just bad, really, from them altogether. They did end up, of course, swapping out John for Johnny. Hard to say he's been playing well at all. He obviously, they just had a 0-3 performance against Seattle where Johnny just got completely destroyed. Pretty much in every way. So maybe you could argue that Paris could be in a little bit of a better spot. Overall, it's tough. It's completely tough out here. Obviously, the big thing to mention with Texas is I believe Illy is coming back. The expectation, I believe, is that Illy is back. Maybe I'll try to pull it up over in my second monitor and see if I could find any confirmation on that. But I believe Illy is back. June 28th, I believe. This is a clip of him talking.
Well, only today.
Or Shotzi talking.
He came in and he was like, "Yo, boys, like I'm feeling good, man." Like,
So yeah, it does look like Illy is back. They've been scrimming together and everything, so looks like Illy is back. The full Optic roster team is returning. I expect that obviously they just took a big bump. They were obviously one of the two, maybe top two teams. It's definitely between Optic and FaZe in terms of being the unquestionably elite teams in the league. Granted, I mean, they've kind of all been playing poorly. It's not just been a lack of Illy. It's really just been Dashy, and he's had no help overall. Like, as you guys can see, Scump and Shotzi's numbers are even pretty down overall. So there is a slight bit of concern, but I think this is just a way too big of an ask for them. Maybe I would look for somebody like Temp at 8.6. I think he can pay off that price tag, but again, the risk of the sweep killing his upside is just way too high. So I'm going to lock and load Optic Texas here. It's going to be extremely popular. I mean, Scump is just completely underpriced at 6.8. Illy is underpriced at 7.6. Dashy and Shotzi are both arguably underpriced at their numbers as well. Shotzi would be the tougher one to try to get in because he is, super expensive. He's not been playing individually well himself either. But we all know the upside of Shotzi. He's, when he's playing his best, he could potentially be the number one player in the entire world. So I'm obviously fine with going with him as well. Obviously, Illy is yet to play online for the Major 4 qualifiers or the Major 3 qualifiers. So it has been a while without him, but I'm fine with going any of them. I think they're all fine price tags. You could argue playing 3 of them is a pretty solid shout. You could go Dashy, Shotzi, Illy, Dashy, Shotzi, Scump, Dashy, Illy, Scump. It'd be hard to leave out Dashy. He'd probably be the only one I'd definitely look to lock in, but it's Call of Duty. Crazy things happen all the time. You could definitely argue maybe Shotzi, Illy, and Scump would be the way to go. Map set pretty big here. Paris typically like to get to the Bocage, and I don't think Optic Texas are necessarily scared of going to the Bocage either. The vetoes are going to be pretty interesting because I do expect Paris to typically ban the Berlin, and it's one of their most banned maps. Obviously, they like to go to the Bocage and the Tuscan, which are both very, very strong maps for DFS purposes. They like to ban the Berlin and the Gavutu, which are pretty amazing for us. It could go either way. The only concern here is that Optic, they kind of ban kind of equally, and maybe they could be, I say this word very, very lightly. They could be scared of Paris's Bocage in the sense of maybe they think if there's one map Paris is actually decent at, it could be the Bocage. Granted, they are 1-4 on it. It's not like they're good in pretty much any sense. But the point being that Paris actually play Bocage. They feel like it's their best map. Maybe Optic just say, we're not going to play Paris on their best map. We're just going to go to all the other maps and have our advantage there. There's a possibility. I think either way, Optic has huge upside at their price tags. I'm not scared to go with any of the Optic boys for sure. Keep in mind, yep, it is Illy, not Proloot in, so keep Proloot out of your player pool, I believe, is the expectation there, unless something changes. But I expect Optic to just completely dominate this one, probably get the 3-0, get this series over quickly, and we could see the Bocage. I'm not sure. Maybe Parrot or maybe Optic let it through. I'm not entirely sure. It's a possibility just because we know Paris like to go to the Bocage so much. They're probably going to ban Berlin. I just don't know with any level of confidence what Optic would ban back. Maybe Optic ban the Gavutu because Paris are 1-0 on it. I'm not sure. That's their second most banned because Paris banned Berlin. That's usually what Optic ban. So maybe Optic just go to the Bocage ban. I think that's what's the most likely scenario, but it's open for sure. So I'm not going to add any pluses or minuses to Optic for map set, and I don't think they need any more. Just their price tags are enough of a plus to slam them into your lineups as well. The next one up is New York, Seattle. Pretty interesting one. Seattle minus 230, New York plus 170. We did end up seeing the volatility of Seattle come into play yesterday. We saw their, I believe, 8-9 series win streak come to an end. Lost to Boston yesterday in a pretty odd fashion, all things considered. I think this one is just pretty close, honestly. Obviously, we look at the numbers and we do see that Seattle's been pretty dominant as of late, especially online. However, if we do take a quick glance and kind of look at who they've been playing, this was they lost to Toronto, they beat Paris, LA. This was a pretty weak Florida team. This was a pretty weak London team, and then they obviously beat Paris again. So overall, online, I don't think they've been pressed too much. And as we could see for New York, their losses are again to Atlanta and then Toronto. They themselves have not played anyone too great either in terms of their wins. They beat Paris, Florida, LAG, and Boston themselves. So overall, this is a pretty close one. I think map set wise, probably pretty good. I expect Seattle typically been the Gavutu, and they like to get to the Bocage and the Tuscan. So ideal map set there from Bocage or from them. They love the Bocage, obviously 4-0 on it. Unfortunately, my fear here is that New York probably recognizing that, and they probably just go ahead and ban the Bocage themselves. I don't think New York is that scared of Seattle on Berlin or Tuscan. The option here is that maybe New York, they've only played the Bocage once. They're 1-0 on it. I do feel like I do recall them banning it kind of recently. I'm not sure. I mean, they only have 2 total Bocage bans themselves. Neither of these teams typically ban it, but I think it could be a rare scenario here for New York to go ahead and look to ban that. Just because if we look at Seattle's numbers without Bocage in them, they're 1-0 on Berlin, 2-1 on Tuscan. Nothing too inspiring. Meanwhile, New York would be 3-2 on Tuscan and then 4-1 on Berlin. So they'd have the upper hand in terms of record and experience in that aspect for both of these, for New York over Seattle. And I think it's going to be a pretty interesting one. I think overall, New York is just way too cheap. Seattle's actually pretty cheap themselves, so I think you could definitely get exposure to both sides of this one if you wanted to. I'm just pretty curious on where people would end up going, because Seattle went on this really, really long streak. Obviously, they won a lot of matches online. However, they obviously went to the LAN and won. Won the LAN. Obviously, they beat New York there. They beat Florida there. They beat FaZe twice there. They obviously won the tournament. They, were definitively the best team on this Major 3 tournament, on LAN, of course. But when we switch to an online setting, we know how these things can get different, and they obviously just lost to Boston yesterday. So, and we've seen with this team before that sometimes when they do get these losses, they can spiral out into a couple of them in a row. The only time that was not true was when they lost the kickoff preseason tournament in the finals. But the rest of the time, it's usually when they lose in bunches. And we know Seattle's an up and down team, and it's going to be tough. I think this is going to be a pretty decent fade on the Seattle side. Again, it definitely does worry me. Pred and Sib's numbers are pretty insane. They're definitely like a very tough one to fade. Like Sib and Pred at 9 and 8.6 are very, very cheap. And I think for that reason, they're going to be a pretty popular set of plays. They're pretty decently sized favorite, minus 230. Their numbers are going to be astronomical. They're probably they're 2 of the top 3 players in terms of numbers for sure in the whole league and on the slate. And they're pretty cheap at 9K. Like they're definitely affordable for sure. So I'd expect them to be pretty popular. Maybe I'm not entirely sold maybe on that, but because we do have the Texas side as well. But I could definitely see people going like Dashy, Illy, Scump, Sib, and Pred. I think that's definitely an affordable and makes sense stack. When it comes to looking at these lineups, these teams. So I'm just going to lean the New York side. I think New York has been pretty good online. I think this is a pretty close series, all things considered. And I just think Seattle, at the end of the day, they're going to be pretty popular because their numbers are so incredible and because they've been playing extremely well and they've just won the major, like all that stuff. I don't want to overreact to their loss to Boston yesterday, but that's just something we've seen with them. Like they obviously won a lot before it just depends where you look at this. Like if you look at this and say Seattle won 9 in a row right here, they're playing great, but then if you check right before that, they lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in a row. 1, 2, lost 2, lost 1 here, lost 5 in a row here. Like that's just sometimes like how it can go with this roster, and that's why we were talking about that the past couple times with this Seattle team. That's why I picked Paris against them. Obviously, that didn't end up working out at all. But that is, something that is a real thing with Seattle, and I could definitely see New York taking advantage of that and putting up a pretty decent fight here. And I think you're getting a pretty decent price tag with them being decent-sized underdogs. They're pretty cheap. I mean, Hydra at 8.2, Paul at 7.4, Kismet at 8K. Like, they're definitely players I'm definitely fine getting into my lineups. For sure. Definitely Hydra and Paul would be the two that I'd look at the most. But it's Hydra, then Paul. I'd probably try to avoid a 3-stack, but the potential is there because the map set, we know Seattle's really wants to get onto Bocage and Tuscan, which are the two best maps for DraftKings scoring for sure. They banned the Gavutu, which is the worst map, so the map set is kind of default pretty decent for a Seattle series. I just worry that New York is probably going to ban Bocage because they've only played it once as of recent. Seattle are 4-0 on it. I'd be relatively scared of the Seattle Bocage if I was New York. So I could definitely see them looking to ban the Bocage in retaliation. Then we get a Berlin and Tuscan, which is definitely fine. I definitely think that's a plus in terms of map set for these teams. So that's something that I'm willing to look at and keep in mind for these players. So that's something where I'll be fine with that, and I'll play these New York players, and I'm fine with that map set as well. LAG Atlanta. This one is not too intriguing, although the price is a little wacky in my opinion. Atlanta minus 750. If we look over on the LAG side, it seemed like they had a really good start. They obviously, their first series out, they were up 2-0 against Toronto, then they got reverse swept, and then they ended up losing to New York in 4 as well. It's kind of just been Hook in the hard points. Like, they've not looked great kind of across the board. Obviously, in Atlanta, FaZe got the sweep over Toronto yesterday, 3-2 over LA last week, I believe. Yeah. So, Atlanta's still looking good. It's really hard to argue anything else. They've been a strong team. They've been strong players. They've been in the finals of every tournament so far for a reason. They're just a really strong team, and I've not been sold on LAG's new roster yet. I do think they've been a little bit better than like the second worst team in the league, which is what they looked like before. Despite them winning major tournament 2, which is a miraculous thing kind of in its own. I just think individually as a team, they've not been great. I still am a little confused as to what Slasher really does. I know he's a good vocal leader and voice for this team, but still I'm not too intrigued for that. Something that's a little hesitant here with FaZe is they have not been great in the respawn game modes, and that's definitely what we want for DraftKings. So it's going to be a little tough. I do think they are relatively cheap. Their most expensive player is 9K Simp, selling him at 8.8. Obesity is a little expensive at 8.8, and RCDs I think is a little pricey at 8K flat himself. So they're definitely going to be in the player pool for me. They're just not going to be priorities. Map set wise, I expect it to be pretty bad, relatively speaking. LAG, they usually ban, so far. I guess we got to expand it here a little bit. But they typically do. Actually, I don't even know. What do they do? It says they've only banned Berlin 3 times, but they've yet to play it. So I'm really not sure. But I think they typically do like to either ban the Bocage or the Gavutu. They're most likely going to ban Atlanta FaZe's Bocage. It's typically been the recipe there. I would expect Atlanta FaZe to turn around and ban the Berlin themselves. So we could get a Gavutu Tuscan or something like that. I think FaZe are most likely going to go to that Tuscan. And then LAG will probably either go, I don't know, it's kind of across the board. Like, the only thing that I feel confident in is FaZe most likely ban that Berlin. And then after that, I'm not sure. It would make sense for LAG to probably ban either the Bocage or the Gavutu. But if we get a scenario where, FaZe have not looked good on Gavutu really or Bocage. So who knows? Maybe LAG go ahead and ban the Tuscan. Like, it's just all across the board. There's a lot of scenarios I could see. Obviously FaZe are 3-0 on the Tuscan. It's been one of their stronger maps as of late. LAG typically don't ban it, and they're willing to go to the Tuscan. So that's the possibility there. Obviously, both teams are 1-2 on Bocage. LAG like to ban the Gavutu, but I don't think FaZe's Gavutu is necessarily scary either. So who knows? I'm just going to leave this one up again as kind of a neutral in terms of map set. I do think we most likely get a Tuscan, but it's just whether or not we have a Gavutu, which is the worst map, or a Bocage, which is the best map to pair it up with. So there's just, I think, a wide variety of outcomes when it comes to the Bocage and the Gavutu and the Tuscan there. For these teams, hell, even Berlin, who knows, maybe FaZe don't ban it because they actually have been playing it as of late. So who knows? This one is just kind of wide open in terms of map set. So I'm just going to leave this one as a neutral in terms of map set and kind of call it there. But again, I still do like FaZe. It's pretty hard to argue anything against them otherwise. We'll look at the player stats, and we'll go ahead and get out of here. Player stats. We do have our team ideas so far. So quick refresh. Make sure the odds have not updated. I think they do live update, actually. But yep, everything is still good. Go to advanced stats. Everything is loading pretty slowly. Set it to the last couple of online qualifiers. Make sure that we have a decent set. So London, Optic, Texas, New York, and then Atlanta FaZe. Those are going to be the players I'm going with here. We can get rid of the people who are not playing. Pro Loot. Dashi, yep. Looks like everyone else here is good. So obviously pretty clear picture. Dashi, Celium, Hydra. Then maybe a slight gap here of Shotzi and Paul. And then we have like players like Zero, Kismet. I mean, we know Simp's upside. We know Scump is pretty cheap. Some of these feel a little misleading, again, because London have been playing pretty poor before that. But, as of super late, this is changed. So what I would do if I were you guys, I would look and wait for hopefully yesterday's matches to get added to the updated players like stuff, because of course 2 of these teams played yesterday or today technically on the 1st, and we're yet to see these numbers updated. So I'd definitely wait to look and see when Zero, Celium, Simp, like when all these players get their numbers updated. For now, because it feels like London is a little bit hard done by these numbers, but I think overall the rest is about the same. Dashi, Celium, Hydra are very elite players. Shotzi is a pretty elite player, although his numbers maybe are a little bit down at the moment. Paul's numbers are pretty solid, and again, I think he's cheap. Zero is a pretty good target. I think he's been playing pretty well. We know Nasty's numbers have been bad, but he's been good the last couple series. So if we were to look at just like Major 4, he would climb all the way up, to up there. So that's the difference. These are the stats. I do think, again, they're a little misleading because we've seen a little bit different versions of these teams as of late. That's where I personally would like to do something like look at their match history and just look at these last couple games. I know we did this earlier, but just for an example's sake, this is what I'd like to do. We'd look at that and say, Nasty and Zero performed pretty well in this Minnesota series. And then Zero and Nasty did really well in this Toronto series as well. So they would probably be the 2 I'd look at in terms of London side. However, we know Afro's numbers are usually a little bit better than this, so he's definitely a viable play as well. But Gizmo would be the one I'd probably look to avoid, granted his past couple matches. And then if we were to do something similar with the FaZe side, yeah, right here. I was going to say, we could see Celium Simp played really well. And then in this one, it was Celium and Simp, a little bit of Varsities as well. So it's definitely been Celium and Simp as of late. And you could definitely argue that those 2 are the ones you'd like to go to there as well. However, I think for the rest of them, like if we were to exclude FaZe and London, if we were to look at like just New York and Texas, I think this is a pretty fair outline of these players. Obviously, we don't have anything from Illy. Let's see if we were to put the qualifiers for Major 2 in here. Yep, so we would have Illy. Obviously, no Clayster. Kismet, Nep. Obviously, no Neptune either. Krim, Kismet, Illy, Paul, Scump, Shotzi, Hydra, Dashi. Yeah, I think like this is a little bit fairer. But we have to take into account things like value. Like we know Illy and Scump are super cheap. I think London is way too underpriced. I think that's going to be a super popular build. I don't know if people are going to get to New York. Maybe people spend up. I think London, Texas, Seattle are all FaZe are going to be pretty popular. I mean, there's a lot of options. There's a lot of different ways to go. But we kind of talked about it, quick map update or quick map recap. Bocage not likely in London, Florida, typically banned by London. Optic, Texas, possibility, but there's a concern there that Optic will ban it out. Similarly with New York, Seattle, I think it's a possibility. However, I think New York should ban the Bocage. And then Atlanta, FaZe, LAG, again, pretty similar. I think FaZe are good on it. I think LAG should probably ban that out as well. So we could see a Bocageless day. I'd imagine it gets through in one of these series, and that's why you kind of try to diversify and hope for the best. I do like a few of these spots. Don't want to rehash it too many times, but London, Texas, New York, Atlanta, those are my spots. I think those make sense to me, and hopefully we can get a right combo of players and teams going here. So that'll be it for me today. I will see you guys all again tomorrow for the 3-gamer tomorrow on the 3rd. And I will be seeing you guys then. Best luck to you guys all tomorrow.